Hello, friends. I'm Sarah Mel. I use they, them pronouns. I am the new experiential and community-based learning coordinator at Rubenstein. Many of you set up your summer internships with my predecessor, Megan Young. And what's fun about that is that means I don't know who everyone is. So I don't know if all of our presenters are in the room or not. So this is a fun game where I look at your faces and think, did I see you in a photo on some slides? Come on in. That is a person definitely who's presenting, so that's great. Thanks so much, all of you, for sending in those slides and creating such thoughtful presentations. I've had a chance to preview them just because I put them all together in one big slide deck. I'll continue to encourage folks, as I did with our perennial interns this summer, that visual representations of learning don't have to be this. So if you are so moved to do interpretive dance during your talk of what not read looks like, I encourage you to try it, as long as you stay on your spot. What I will say is that we are recording this for posterity, and so that we can share your presentations with both your site supervisors and the greater Rubenstein world. In particular, our first and second year students who are so curious about what it means to do internships or research here at Rubenstein. Your presentations and the ways you articulate your learning for them really helps folks figure out what's available, what can they do, and see possibilities that they might not ever have even thought. So for recording purposes, the camera is in the back. There are a couple of X's, one here and one here, that are meant to kind of act as guardrails. If you go too far this way, I become just a voice and not a person. We'll encourage folks to stay in between those. We have a clicker so that I don't have to be responsible for when you want to move forward in your presentation. The lineup is by the snacks, by the door. Kathy is going to be our timer. So everybody has about 4 minutes. When we have more than one person presenting, we can be a little more, give a little more wiggle room there, because we do have some team presentations tonight.
I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
And it'll look like that, just so you know, prepare yourselves. And I want to also express gratitude to Marie and Jess who helped set up the space tonight, and to all of the Rubenstein Student Services staff who've helped me understand what this event is all about, and to all of you for teaching me so many cool things that I never knew before. Questions before we begin? Yes?
I had to send you a different presentation because my other one was messed up. Did you get that?
Did I get that? Yeah. That's a good question. I got everything that was sent to me by 4 o'clock today, and likely updated it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember what time I sent it at.
Checking. Oh, hi Olivia, glad you found it.
Since like 4:06.
Crap. Hey, there it is. And I did not see
I'm
that.
so sorry.
That's okay. We'll hope that yours worked. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, it's much longer than I had 2 versions, and I sent you the wrong version.
You sent me the long one.
Yes.
That's great.
So
we'll just see all those images.
Okay, I'm gonna have to skip through a lot of stuff then, because there's a lot of content.
You're in charge of the clicker.
Okay.
Yeah, you are in charge of the clicker. Any other questions before we kick off? Is Ethan in the room? I thought that was you. Awesome. Cool. And here you go. So clicking the big one makes it go forward.
There we go.
It's the simplest
All right.
way.
That works. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah, and everybody else who made this possible. Kind of excited to tell you all a little bit about what I was up to this summer. So my name is Ethan Marshy. I'm a junior wildlife and fisheries biology major, concentrating in fisheries. And this summer, I interned at VHB. And what is VHB? It's just an acronym. So VHB is Vanasse England Breslin. It's that's their technical, you go on their website, it's like, oh, we're a multidisciplinary civil engineering consulting and design firm. But that doesn't tell you anything about the environment or anything like that. So these are just a few projects that VHB has kind of or carried out. So this thing, that's like down on the waterfront, that was an old coal coal-fired power plant that VHP did a bunch of site investigation and remediation, they call it. So there's tons of hazardous waste down there, and like they're just kind of behind that. Sugarbush, they do all kinds of environmental surveys for lift replacements, and this was a big stream restoration project up there. So it was kind of cool. I was able to spend a few days at Sugarbush this summer, ride the lifts up to the top and trek around. And then the Memorial Valley Rail Trail, they were also instrumental in that. So the 93-mile stretch from Swanton to St. Johnsbury. So lots of cool stuff going on there. So this is a lot of information, but this is kind of what I was up to this summer. So on the left, you can see these are basically all office tasks. So Mondays and sometimes another day in the week, I'd be in the office and I'd be processing a lot of data that we collected out in the field. Over on the right, that's the cool stuff that I was doing out in the field. So I was doing some rare, threatened, endangered plant surveys. I did some of those on the Memorial Valley Rail Trail, which was pretty cool. Let's see. So USACE, that's like Army Corps. So they regulate wetlands in the U.S. So we collected a lot of data for that. Probably the biggest thing though was wetland and stream delineation. So basically, you go out where somebody wants to develop and you delineate all the wetlands and the streams that are out there. So that entails a lot of ArcGIS field maps. So I got a pretty rigorous crash course introduction to field maps, but collecting data that gets sent off to clients, so it's pretty serious. You know, you gotta know what you're doing. Yeah, so that's kind of the gist of what I would do throughout a week. Some of my favorite parts, they're not on this slide, but I'll just kind of highlight them. Over there on the bottom, the bear scarred beach surveys and the bear spring feeding surveys. So that's kind of a collaboration with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. And so I was going out into wetlands and just kind of looking around for bear activity or big nice stands of American beech and looking for like scratch marks on them. So I'm pretty much just hiking around in the woods, having a good time. And whoa, okay. I gotta speed up. Okay, so these are some of the deliverables that all that data would be used for. So this kind of data collection, this kind of supports sustainable development. We worked on a lot of renewable energy projects like solar arrays, wind farms, battery storage sites. I'm gonna keep going, but yes. So these are some of the cool pictures. Right here, you can kind of see like a handprint. Not actually, it's a little tough to see in this lighting, but that's the bear scar beach. I was doing some rare plant surveys up in this utility right away, and I was doing bear spring feeding surveys, and that's a wind farm in Vermont. So some quick DEI connections. I know I'm probably running out of time here. So a big thing with renewable energy is kind of knowing who the companies are targeting, essentially, because a lot of these companies will buy land, will lease land, and a big part of that is, who are they buying it from and what are they offering? Because a lot of times they'll target marginalized communities that may be less equipped to negotiate fair terms of a lease or assess the long-term consequences of a massive solar field that might have some, they call it like heat island effects. So this is a map of a soundscape analysis for a battery storage site. Yes. Tips for future interns. So many opportunities to tailor this internship to what you are really interested in. So with wetland delineation, you got hydrology, you have vegetation, you have soils. Also, like tons of plant ID, like all kinds of scientific names. ArcGIS. Get a good pair of rubber boots. You're tromping around out in the swamp. A couple times I was up to the hip in mud. And just be super prepared and enthusiastic for the long field days, because this is kind of where the real learning happens. The office stuff is great, but hands-on activity is kind of where it's made. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Olivia. With a big clicker,
Okay.
big arrow.
So I'm Olivia. I am a sophomore forestry student, and I went to Alaska this summer for my internship. So I interned with Chugach which is legally described as that description, but essentially it's an organization that provides different services to native tribes in the Chugach region of Alaska. And then, so that's in the Chugach region, and then Mute means for the people of, so it's for the people of this region. So this is Kenai, where I was staying at the fire camp, and then down here are 2 of the native villages that I got to fly into to do the forestry work. So Homer, Alaska is here, and we took a float plane from Homer to Nanwalek and Fort Graham, which are the 2 villages, but the organization benefits all the tribes in this region. So what did I do? I was on a wildland fire crew. It was a type 2 wildland fire crew, so I was on a hand crew. And when I got there, I got my red card and some things that we were doing on fire crew: saw line, hose lay, structure protection, and then it was all indirect firefighting, so all the manual labor, creating the saw line, and all of that. And then as part of the forestry work that I got to do, that's the picture in the woods of Fort Graham, which is one of the native villages. I was on CFI trips, which is continuous forest inventory. And then I worked with the company that I was with, 2 foresters, and then foresters from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it was in those two villages. And then the KPB project was the Kenai Peninsula Bureau project that I got to do on my own in Kenai after learning how to do all the forestry work in the villages. So this was the first fire assignment that I was on. I had to make this drive from Kenai to Gold King Creek, which was interior Alaska. So it was Alaska, but it was still about 80 to 90 degrees when I was there working. And a fun fact about Alaska wildfires, we were working 16-hour shifts compared to the 12 hours that are more common downstates. So I had a few different tasks. It's me holding up a poorly wrapped hose, and then I got to do the belt weather kit a lot of the days and read that over the radio to all the fire personnel. And then more pictures from that. This is me and Crystal. Crystal was the only other woman there for about a week of the 3 weeks that I was on the first fire. And then in the bottom right is me on top of a roof. I got to climb up on all the roofs and install the hoses because no one else wanted to do that, and I thought it was fun. And then this is the second fire. This is all of us lined up to go out to the saw line, and then me in the middle of the helipad with 2 of the other crew members. And then on the bottom right in this one, you can see the saw line that we cut in the forest, which took a long time. And then forestry work that I was doing was the continuous forest inventory. We were doing it completely off trail, which is a lot harder than it sounds. And then we were using Avenza, which is the mapping app, and then Fulcrum, which is in that picture, the data collection app that we were doing at each of the plots. And then this is, I was staying in a dry cabin right in front of this, so this was a view that I got to see every morning for a week. And then the 2 foresters on the left are from the company that I worked for this summer, and the 2 on the right are both from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's another picture of me. That's in Fort Graham on the Fort Graham CFI trip. And then this is the KPB project that I was doing. So it was mostly to manage first the spruce bark beetle. I was using the same apps, and rather than being as specific as we were doing in the villages, we were using the reloscope to dictate what trees were inside and out of the plot. And then on the right, that's me teaching 2 of the other guys on the fire crew how to do the forest inventory work. And yeah, in the middle is what it looks like on Avenza with all the different plots. So we had to hike out to all of those through all the trees and everything. And that's another picture of me in Fort Graham, because that was, thankfully I got to crawl over the log, but I did have to take off my boots and walk through the river a few other times. Yeah?
you were doing both these things at the same time?
Yeah, so when I wasn't on the wildland fire assignments that the crew was called on to, I was doing the forestry work, so.
So you just signed up for both of these things separately?
I signed up for the internship not realizing that it was actually gonna be like a full-on position on the wildland fire crew. And it ended up being that, and they said that I could do as much or as little on the crew as I wanted to, and I was gonna jump at that opportunity. So I just got to go on the 2 inventory trips and then do the forestry work in Kenai as well when I wasn't. The 2 fire assignments, the first one that we were on was 21 days, which is the max for a wildland fire assignment. So 21 days working 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then the second one was about 2 weeks. So other than that, I was doing forestry work. But yeah, any other questions, I guess? I think I'm out of time.
Goodness, I should look at my own lineup. Bella.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm a senior SEP major, concentration in ecology. And this summer I was the waterkeeper intern at the Nantucket Land and Water Council. So the Nantucket Land and Water Council is a nonprofit group that focuses on protecting Nantucket's natural resources. Their goal is to preserve Nantucket's environmental health and well-being along with the community and the people that live there. And they are involved in a number of different projects that are advocacy focused or policy focused, more scientific research and everything in between. And this summer was actually their 50th-year anniversary, which was really exciting to be there for that big milestone. So as the waterkeeper, I was in charge of everything water quality. So I weekly would go pond sampling to check for HABs, which is harmful algal blooms. And so there was a program set up on the island for other environmental organizations. So I only did 2 ponds out of the many that are on the island. I also did rainwater collection, so I would go to a rainwater collection site every week, switch out the bucket, bring the rainwater back, process it, and then ship it off to be recorded for NADP, which is, I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's atmospheric something along those lines. I would also participate in educational programs and activities, so the organization would lead kayak tours, they would do tree walks in the town to talk about the history of the types of trees. We would go to the yacht clubs and the kids at the yacht clubs for summer camps, and we would teach them about the different organisms that live in the intertidal zones. So those were some of the educational activities. A big one that I did was working on the PFAS project, which was a really amazing project that they are trying to get published to replicate in other communities, where we went and tested different people's homes, and we tested their water, and we were working with Notre Dame and a physicist there who has created a type of testing that is able to test for a number of different PFAS chains, whereas some of the testing now only tests for a few, but they tested for a larger portion of the chain. So that was really, really cool to be a part of. Oh my goodness. Greywater sampling, every morning, or not every morning, but a few times you would go secretly and out into the harbor to test to see if the yachts were dumping their gray water and not responsibly disposing of it. And then also attending Conservation Commission meetings, which was the local, was the local commission that dealt with a lot of the environmental issues on the island. These were the ponds that I did: Gibbs Pond, Capon Pond. This was Capon at its worst algal bloom. which was really, really bad. And so, yeah, monitoring water quality is essential for understanding current conditions of our waters and how to help and prevent issues from arising. And advocacy is essential in, making change, and especially for all of these issues, it's important to be involved in the local politics. 3 key learnings I learned just about PFAS in general, understanding how to communicate environmental issues with local governments, and just how to use water quality tools. Highlights, living on Nantucket was probably the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was a dream. There were so many other environmental groups on the island, it was really, really cool to connect with them. And then the staff at Nantucket Land and Water Council is absolutely incredible. That's my boss, who's the water keeper. And we would spend every single day together just working and going out in the field and stuff. And then, like other people said, early mornings, be prepared to be flexible because things change, and bring some nice clothes because there's a lot of cocktail parties and events, and you need gowns. Like, people dress up, so yeah. All right, thank you.
Naomi!
Alrighty. Hi everyone, I'm Naomi. I'm a senior natural resources major in the policy and planning specialization. This summer I worked at South Hero Land Trust as a trail steward. South Hero Land Trust is a nonprofit up in, you guessed it, South Hero, up in the islands. And originally they were formed to be a land trust to help work with community members and farmers to put their land into a land trust so that it remains in the community as farming land. But as the land trust has grown, it's kind of become a catch-all for a lot of the environmental problems and environmental concerns of the islanders. So this summer I worked as a trail steward, but because of how complex a lot of the issues, given to a really small nonprofit, there were 3 full-time working staff and 2 part-time interns, I actually ended up wearing a lot of hats. So the ones in gold was what I was actually hired to do, and then the ones in blue, plus many more, is what I ended up doing kind of as a side gig, and actually I ended up being an educator and a gardener for like 90% of the time. But I was hired to write up an audit about the accessibility of the 7 trail networks that South Hero Land Trust stewards. So I ended up designing from scratch an audit, implementing it, going out, measuring a bunch of the data needed, and making ArcGIS maps to kind of suggest for future interns and future work with the land trust what they should do. And not only that, I tried to make it as easily readable as possible, because the South Hero Land Trust has plans to share that with folks who are in the disabled community as to see what they would like to see from us. I was also a trail steward, so I ended up taking about like 1 million trees down, and I also wrote a report, but it kind of ended up turning into maps, which was really cool. I took out a lot of knotweed, which is a throwback to when I took out knotweed for a whole summer. I also took out a lot of honeysuckle, which was new to me. I worked 3 weeks as a summer camp counselor, and we stewarded 2 gardens where all the food was donated to a local food shelf. Here are some fun impact stats. Some of these may not necessarily be that accurate. I don't actually know if it was 500 more or less. That's what I guess. Highlights, I got to lead a nature walk about the wetlands and their kind of impact on flooding, like 3 days after this 2nd year of flooding. I got 3 newspaper articles written about me, which was pretty cool, and about the land trust, but I was in it. And I got to lead and kind of not lead, but be a kind of naturalist in training at an adaptive kayaking event, and got to see bald eagles. It was really cool. Yeah, I recharged a lot of electric lawnmowers. I would recommend, if you have the chance, use gas. I know it's not environmentally friendly, but the amount of times I would have to quit halfway through because the lawnmower battery died, maybe we buy you 2 batteries. Yeah, these are some impact stats, fun ones. And then here, if you'd like to peruse, these are all my highlights. Yeah, that's me and my emotional support level against the world. I carried that thing around for days. It was awesome. And Sprinkles the cow and his farmer, Steve, that was named by a bunch of kindergartners. It was awesome. I got to bike to work across the causeway and go across the bike area. That's really cool too. Here's my 3 key findings. Outdoors should be made accessible for everyone. The accessibility is a rising tide that lifts all boats. environmental education is investing in the future. These kids know what they're talking about, and they want, and you should be encouraging that for everyone. And then positive friendships make positive connections. I've been able to get a lot of really awesome recommendations just because I put my best foot forward and made sure that I was the best person that I could be in this internship. And then, yeah, tips for internships: say yes to every opportunity. I wouldn't have led a nature walk if I didn't say I could do it, even if I didn't think I could. First impressions matter. Stay positive, take photos and write it all down. That's my fellow intern Parker, and there was supposed to be a deer there, but it ran off before we could take a photo. Thank you, everybody. I think you can see the butt of it somewhere.
Parker's eyebrow.
Yeah,
Parker's eyebrow?
I think it's right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? I don't know if we have time for that, but cool.
Thank you, Naomi. Amazing. All right. Bella, Linda, Jacqueline.
Oh, speaking of knotweed,
Speaking
nice
of
work,
knotweed,
guys.
say that, yeah.
I might have maybe
Intentionally done that.
All right. Hi, y'all. I am Bella. I am a senior who's studying environmental science.
I am Jack. I'm a junior studying environmental science.
And this was our Mad River Valley knotweed summer. So before we begin, I just want to respectfully acknowledge that the land that we are currently on, the land that we were working on and discussing, is the ancestral home of the Abenaki people. The history, culture, and connection to this land was abruptly and profoundly disrupted by colonization. And it's important that we recognize this truth, as failing to do so continues these erasures of Indigenous presence and history. So what is the Mad River Valley Knotweed Project? It's a project with collaboration with Basin, Warren, and Waitsfield Conservation Commission to eradicate knotweed throughout the Mad River Valley. We did that by experimenting with 3 different methods of manual removal. We did pulling, cutting, and then also grazing. We were not the ones grazing. It was the lovely goats over there. And we also partnered with the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab to map knotweed and track propagules using ArcGIS tools.
So like Bella just said, Bella, the other interns, and I, we spent our days cycling around the 3 towns in the Mad River Valley, engaging in different management and eradication of Asiatic knotweed. So a little background on what Japanese knotweed is and why it's so bad for our environment is it spreads rhizomatically, which it's like a horizontal stem that grows underground like a root. And a little part of that will break off and then flow downstream and get stuck in the riverbank and then grow a whole new just family of knotweed, as you can see in that. So it's very, very dangerous, especially around these red herring zones in the Mad River Valley.
Yes. So cutting is one of the methods of manual removal that we did. So we were not getting any of the root mass out of the ground with this, but rather the purpose of it was to kind of get knotweed to use all of its energy, trying to shoot up different shoots constantly, depriving it of getting any sunlight, therefore energy. And through routinely doing that, the plant would eventually just die out as we basically deprived it of its photosynthetic capabilities.
The next method of dealing with knotweed was pulling, and so this did get the root mass out of the ground, or as much of it as we could. And so we would just grab it at the bottom and pull it out. And this was my personal favorite. It's very, very satisfying to pull this thing out. Yeah, it's very fun.
And kind of under the same umbrella as pulling, oftentimes we did not get all of the root mass out, or as much as we possibly could, so we would dig. We would get these big old root balls. We would always hold them up like fish and take pictures with them. It was very interesting. But yeah, basically the main purpose of this is just to get as much root mass or rhizome mass out of the ground as we possibly could. So the importance of the project, as I just stated, knotweed knotweed's rhizomatic, so it doesn't have roots and therefore root hairs which hold on to dirt. Knotweed primarily established itself in riparian zones, and therefore knotweed propagules along the riverbank destabilize the riverbank. We also wanted to positively contribute to ecosystem health as knotweed outcompetes native vegetation, and we wanted to return accessibility to public spaces as these dense knotweed stands form all throughout the river, and just kind of stop the public from being able to access the Mad River.
So some of our key learnings, number one is perseverance. We would go to these sites repeatedly about once a week. And so 1 week we'd go to one site and we'd pull it all out, and then we'd be back the next week and it would already be kind of up to our knees. So we learned very much about perseverance.
Helping the environment is extremely important, no matter how big or small. In the grand scheme of Knotweed's range, the Mad River Valley is just a small drop in that. However, the work that we were doing was extremely important, as I just stated. So while it does feel pretty small regarding, how widespread knotweed is, the Mad River community was definitely very grateful.
And a strong community is key to restoration projects. You'll see kind of in the future slides, the next couple, we worked with the community very much on this project, and they're all very involved with what we're doing and all very driven to help this problem.
So highlights.
So this is the first summer we kind of added GIS to the project, and we teamed up with the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab, which one day they came down to Lareau, which was one of the watering holes we worked at, and they brought a drone to kind of scope out all of the knotweed area of the land. And then also every day we would go to our sites, and using our phones, we would document what site we went to, how much knotweed was there, and we'd be able to look at this over time and kind of see the downward slope of the effect of what we're doing.
Yeah. Another one is walking the river. I think I speak for most of our team when I say that this was probably one of our favorite experiences regarding the internship. These were days where we would literally just walk down the Mad River or climb on the shore, because they didn't really have well-established, whatever. It was just great. It was great team bonding.
And like I said earlier, we got really close to our community through either knotweed pull parties, which I thought was a very funny way to market this. And we would get people from the community to come join us in pulling, cutting, digging knotweed out. And then also me, Bella, all the other interns went to the Wastefield Farmers Market and spread our knowledge to the people in the towns.
Another big highlight was the goats. This was often what the community would ask us first when we told them we were part of the Knotweed crew. They literally had their own news article as well as fit in the evening news. They're just really cute at the end of the day. We worked with the goat herder, Mary Beth, and we would, work to establish paddocks, rotate the paddocks, etc. We even got to herd goats ourselves one day, which was really interesting. A lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, tips for future interns.
So like I touched on earlier with perseverance, don't get discouraged. It might seem like it's just always coming back and it's always going to be there, but just don't get discouraged because we are helping the environment.
Appreciate every second. I know that hanging out with the same 6 people for 6 hours a day, every day, may seem crazy, but these people did turn into my family, and I would absolutely give anything to go back to the summer.
Take every opportunity you can to interact with the community, like we did through community days and farmers market.
Get to know the native flora and fauna of the Mad River Valley, particularly poison ivy and poison parsnip, because they're everywhere and it's really not fun when you have physical contact with them. But also, it's just a great opportunity, field learning is, to get to know your environment.
Then last but not least, stop at the Village Garden every chance you get. This was probably the site we visited most, and it provided soda, creamies. We go once every day, sometimes even twice every day, which is a great...
We were regulars.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. I don't know if we have time for questions, but are there any questions? Yeah?
Did the cell manually identify patches, or do they have some program to automate it?
Wait, did the what?
The spatial analysis laboratory, sorry.
So basically, we kickstarted this using Survey 123 and field maps. We would use Survey 123 to kind of identify propagules and routinely update that for maintenance. So we were kind of the ones who were identifying knotweed propagules throughout the Mad River Valley. Hence, the purpose of our walking the river. We were just scouting. But yeah, thank you guys.
All right, next up, Grace Wang and Shay Hansen.
So hi everyone, my name is Grace
I am a junior environmental science major with a conservation bio concentration.
And I'm Shay Hansen. I'm a senior environmental science major with the same concentration.
And so this summer we were forestry, ecology, field and lab technicians at the Adair Forestry Sciences Lab, just right down Spear Street. And we were exploring temporary temperature inversions on an elevation gradient around the Northeast in like Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And so basically what that means is that across like the valleys and mountain ranges, these areas of cold air, like denser cold air, will sit, and they cycle throughout the day, and the like temporal distribution of them is different depending on where you are, but we were just basically exploring if those areas could act as microrefugia for cold-tolerant species in the face of climate change.
So our internship had a lot of field work, including a week-long trip to Maine, which was super fun. And we hiked up 18 different transects of elevation gradient. And at these transects, there were previously established plots, which, because this is a 6-year project, we were only a small part of the project we were lucky to be able to help with. But at these plots, there were 2 different types of temperature sensors, one which we gathered and collected and then put a new one up and replaced it, and another one we carried a little computer and downloaded the data right in the field and got graphs immediately as we were at the plots.
And so after we collected all of that data from all of our different plots, the last couple weeks of our internship were spent processing that data. So we created a bunch of R scripts and all of these fun, beautiful graphs to kind of analyze and look for patterns within our data. We also created new community temperature indices for each of the different plots based on the hardwood communities that we observed in those areas. And then, yeah, this is like soil curves that we looked at because there was also soil, and then like decomposition analyses. It was a lot of different things that we worked on.
So we also thought about the local needs of the community we were interacting with. When we went to Maine, we went to an area run by the Appalachian Mountains Club's 100-mile wilderness, and so we had a land steward come and kind of act as our guide, so it was really awesome to meet him and ask a bunch of questions about his job and how he got there. And we also worked with some grad students who are working on greenhouse gas emissions on different farms. So they were working on local farms in Vermont, and we got to go to the farms and help sample and respect the needs of the farmers while also working to reach the grad students' goals.
And so what we learned overall, and some tips for future interns, basically what I just went over, we had a huge diverse range of tasks from like bench work to ag field work to intense forestry field work. And so I think that we got to see kind of all of these different aspects, and then also speak to the grad students and postdocs and RPI about what kind of a future environmental sciences would look like. And for me personally, I learned how to interact with these lab and field spaces and figured out what I enjoyed, which was forestry ecology work, and then also just data analysis. And then Shay also learned. Yeah.
I really enjoy the bench work part of it, and we both actually still work at the forestry lab through this semester, so that's what I think. And then our biggest highlight was getting to explore the Northeast. We went to a bunch of cool places that we probably never would have gotten to explore without this internship because you needed a special permit to get there. And we also got to interact with tons of cool people in all different ranges of forestry. There's also the U.S. Forest Service has some offices down at the forestry lab, so we got to talk to some of those employees, and it was awesome. We had so much fun this summer.
Thank you, friends. Maggie, we'll see which one came up. I want all the slides with all the photos.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm gonna have to skip through a lot of things. This is really long. I have to say. But yeah. So my name is Maggie. How do I go back? Oh my god. Okay. Sorry. I had the privilege of being the student volunteer for the National Weather Service. I'm an environmental sciences student, by the way. So what is the National Weather Service? It's an agency under the federal government. It's part of the Department of Commerce. The parent agency is NOAA. There's 122 weather forecasting offices across the country and U.S. territories. Every state has an office. Our office here is in Burlington, in the airport actually, but the office for Southern Vermont is in Albany, actually, Albany, New York. So yeah. This is a map. It's a distribution of all the offices, but I'm going to go through it. It's the most important. So what did I do? I mostly worked under my supervisor, Pete Banakis. He's a science and operations officer. I shadowed operations a lot, so that we're looking at regional forecasting, TAPS, which is aviation forecasting, so helping the planes land safely. Issuing severe weather watches and warnings, which was like really important this summer for obvious reasons. And then my big undertaking was a research project about flood and flash flood climatology in Vermont and northern New York, which again I'll talk more about. Forecasting entails near and long term. There's a lot of different models that they use. Some of them are better at predicting things than others. So like some look at fog a little easier, some can predict convection better. This is wrong. That's supposed to say AWIPS. Very sorry about that. It's a big old computer that's in like the back of the building. It's massive. I can't even describe how big that thing is, and it's freezing back there. But it's it basically assembles all of the information. All the data, radar, imagery to help feed all the models. I'm going to skip through this, but know that flash flooding and flooding was really bad this summer. I'm going to skip through that, sorry. So severe weather days were like probably one of the coolest, most interesting, but terrifying things that happen there. It's really crazy, but it kind of operates like a very well-oiled machine in there. Everybody has a different role, so whether that's just looking at models, watching the storm move through, drawing polygons for warnings, actually issuing warnings. Social media was like a really big thing. As you can imagine, communication is really important. It's like a matter of life and death for some people. So that was really crazy. I got on the roof a lot sometimes to take photos of the weather, and it was really cool, but I definitely don't do that. I shouldn't have done that. It's like all the instruments are up there, you're like a walking lightning rod. This is one of the coolest images I feel like came out of that. So this was from New York. I don't remember which event this was, but this is a supercell. This is a hook echo, which means that the conditions were favorable for a tornado, which is not normal for, honestly, any of these areas. It's very mountainous. It's not something that happens. But yeah, that was, we don't know if a tornado happened there or not. There's nobody lives there, so you can't really confirm any damage or rate it or anything. But just know that it totally could have. The two big events that happened this summer were like within weeks of each other, which is crazy. We had Hurricane Beryl, which was a tropical depression by the time it got to us. Wow, that's really bad. Okay, yeah, just know that those are really bad. This was what I'm talking about, my big project. I used like thousands of data points to assemble like graphs, scatter plots and maps and whatnot, that just basically looking at like patterns over like the past until 1996 to 2023. This is one of the graphs that I made. This is just diurnal patterns, so it's like throughout the day. Red is flash floods. You can notice like in the afternoon is when it seems to peak, and that's because of afternoon thunderstorms. It's warm enough, there's enough moisture for thunderstorms to occur. This is another thing, flood and flash flooding events. As you can see, southern Vermont suffers a lot. That's because of topography. There's another graph, I'm gonna skip past this. Why is this important? These are like my big takeaways. Mostly it's like planning for disaster planning, allocation of resources, which areas are getting hit the hardest, which communities are most vulnerable, so like that's small businesses. You're looking at, like I said, like southern Vermont also, they just slammed a lot, and then even the NEK is kind of a new one. But yeah, a lot of this is a matter, it's people's lives, and it's a matter of life and death, especially with, storms are getting worse. So, there's forecasters at all offices 24/7, and genuinely thank God for that, because, yeah, these are people's lives. Yeah. Sorry to speak for
Amazing. So our next presentation is actually audio, because Kaylee couldn't be here. So we're going to watch.
My name is Katie, and this summer I interned at Save a Tree. This was located in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and I did it from June 3rd to August 16th. And you're probably asking yourself, like, what the heck is Save a Tree? So Save a Tree was founded in 1978 by this guy, Ralph. with the sole purpose of saving trees from the gypsy moth. But now Save a Tree has 75 locations across the US. They provide tree, plant, and lawn care services. So some of these services can include tree and shrub pruning, removals, the managing of insects and fungal diseases, and a custom lawn care based on soil conditions. So for the first 2 weeks, I spent my time with plant and lawn care specialists. This is where I learned different diseases. I practiced my tree ID. I got to spray trees and shrubs for disease treatment and lawns for mosquito and tick control. Then I spent my time with the tree crews, and this is where I spent a majority of my
Sorry, I'm hitting pause only because this image should have changed already, and it has not. And I'm not sure why. Oop. Oh, nope, don't want that to happen.
things to prune tree.
There we
I
go.
spent my time with the tree crews, and this is where I spent
Ah! Wow, technology, you're really having fun. One more try. Don't touch it.
with plant and lawn care specialists. This is where I learned different diseases. I practiced my tree ID. I got to spray trees and shrubs for disease treatment and lawns for mosquito and tick control. Then I spent my time with the tree crews, and this is where I spent a majority of my summer. I learned how to prune trees and shrubs. I did even more tree ID. I learned how to use a chainsaw, how to use a wood mover, a stump grinder, and then for 2 days during the last week that I was there, I went with the arborists. This is where I learned different types of disease. I got to do even more tree ID. I learned how they did jobs, and I got to talk with customers, which is really cool. So Save a Tree is really important. They provide and promote health of trees by pruning and shaping them. It's really good for urban health. They assist during storm cleanup, which this actually was a really bad storm that we got over the summer that I got to help with. And they go in and shape trees that will provide and prevent hazards such as weak branches and root issues. And overall just kind of contributes to the beauty of individual houses and neighborhoods, parks, stuff like that. So some key learnings was working in a team. So this really developed my skills in communication and collaboration, and I kind of learned more how to function and do my part in a bigger team. I also did equipment operations, so this is where I learned how to use a chainsaw, stump grinder, a chipper, a wood mover, a hedge trimmer, a pole saw. I even got to fly the bucket, which was not my favorite, but I got to do it. And I've also learned how to rig lines. So also I worked with clients, so interacting with them and developing my customer service skills. I learned how to handle customer concerns and kind of how to effectively go at a problem and find a solution. I also learned professional behavior and kind of saw a glimpse into the real world, which was really awesome. So some highlights was talking with the clients. I really liked when I shadowed with the arborist and I got to learn how they bid a job and estimate how much it's going to be, and I got to talk to the clients, and they told me all about how they love their trees and everything like that. One highlight was also treating the trees and lawns. That was really fun to spray it. And one other thing was installing a duckbill system, which I had never done before. But this I installed with my coworker, and we went to this house where this tree had been mauled by a bear. And so this was before and this was after, which it was really awesome to learn how to do, and I really enjoyed it. So at Save a Tree, they really focus on equity and diversity and social justice. So they really provide skills and resources for every employee. And this is things like training programs through CDL training, or climbing camp, and they provide equipment like chaps, boots, helmets, everything like that. I would say one thing they could definitely work on was enhancing the work environment to like make it more reliable and trustworthy. They could also focus on gender diversity and leadership roles to kind of like attract a broader customer base. And some tips for future interns. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Everyone is going to be willing to help you. And I would also say connect with your coworkers. It can be so much fun when you have fun at work. Other thing would be to set personal goals. I set a goal of I wanted to learn how to fly the bucket, even if I may not want to do that in the future, but I gotta learn how to do that. And I really wanted to learn how to use a chainsaw. So that was really awesome, and my manager was able to help me with that. Always be open to feedback. It can be really helpful, especially when you're learning, and everyone is not criticizing you, they're just letting you learn. And number one thing I would say is have a positive attitude. It can really, really make or break a day. Having a positive attitude is just gonna make being at work so much better. And yeah, that's everything I have.
Hello, I'm Greaser. This is mine. I'd like to apologize for this font situation. You did a lovely job. That's my bad. I submitted yeah. In an ideal world, there was going to be a lovely picture of a vulture that was going to slide out from the side, and we were all going to go, ooh, a baby vulture. But yeah. Anyway, this is my internship at the Almoon Raptor Center. So a little bit about Almoon. It is a small organization in Boyds, Maryland, centered around the rescue and rehabilitation of birds of prey. When I say small, I mean really, really small. This lovely woman here, this is Suzanne Shoemaker. She's the founder. She's a master rehabilitationist with a falconry license, and the entire thing was run out of her backyard. So she's got like a little barn situation and a little back kitchen situation, and that was it. That was the entire area. And despite that, I saw over 70 birds in my time there, in just under 3 months, which was pretty crazy. So what I did, basically everything. It's such a small organization that they basically just were like, here, do this, do that. I gutted and prepped rats for feeding. We had to remove the intestines of all of the small creatures we fed these birds because they're sick birds and intestines contain bacteria. I did a lot of cleaning, a lot of prepping of food, but I also got to help with treatments, which was really cool. So I got to prep medications for different birds. I learned how to fill syringes and what types of medications different birds need. I got to hold birds, learn how to handle them, and I got to help imp feathers, which was a cool process where we have bird A who's living and needs feathers, and bird B who's less fortunate and no longer needs their feathers, and so we take the feathers off bird B, we clean them out, and then we put them on bird A. That's kind of an interesting situation. But yeah, I also went out on a couple bird calls where somebody called in and said, hey, we found a bird on the side of the highway, and then I got to go out there and learn how to pick up that bird and transport it back. So it's pretty cool. I'll go through this a little bit quicker than I was planning on it for time constraints, but basically, I think a lot of times when people do internships, there's pressure to internship with really big organizations like the EPA or like famous places because you think it's going to do a lot of good for your resume, which it will, but there's also a lot of value in smaller internships. I got to do so much more interning here than I would have at one of the larger wildlife rehabilitation organizations in my area. Because I was one of the 5 staff there on any given days, I got to see everything. I got to watch them do x-rays, which was epic. I got to wrap injured wings. They had me holding birds on the second day. Supervised. They did not just hand me a bird and they were like, here, go have fun. Very supervised. But yeah, I had no idea. I'd never worked with any animal prior to the summer. And by the end of the summer, they could put me in my car, send me out, and I could go pick up a bird from the side of the road, 100% confident, which I don't think I could have done in a bigger internship. The other really cool thing is that I got to work with personal stories, so I won't go all the way into this. This was Pop and Osprey, and I got to witness Pop's entire rehabilitation journey from start to finish. And I really felt like I was doing something important. I feel like a lot of times I do projects for school and just in places where I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I look at this Osprey and I'm like, yes, that's why I'm here. Couple key takeaways. Don't judge people by their appearance. I went out on a call to pick up a red-tailed hawk. Call came from a really country-sounding guy in a massive lifted pickup truck, and I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be fun. Rolled out there, comes out, he's cradling the bird in his arms. He goes, yeah, so I sung him a little song, and then he fell asleep. I was like, you, sir, are going to be the next Disney princess. So, don't judge people by their appearances. 2, humans do a lot of harm, but there's also a lot of humans willing to do good. For every human that hits a bird and drives away, there are 4 more willing to stand there on the side of the road for 45 minutes and wait for you to come pick the bird up. So, and 3, when holding a vulture, keep one hand on the beak, they bite. But yeah, so some issues in general I've noticed with these internships though is that a lot of times smaller internships can't pay. They don't pay. And so that means that the people that work there either got funding from somewhere, they're older and retired, or they've got families who can support them. And that's not the case for everybody. I know for me, I worked this internship and then I did a second one that paid me at the same time. Worked 6 days a week the whole summer, which was fun. But yeah, and so obviously systematic change and more support for students to allow us to have these experiences is important. I'd go on about that, but I feel like I'd be preaching to the choir. But yeah, so there's a lot of things we have to help, like scholarships and supplemental things, but I think it's important that we continue providing student support to do these kinds of internships. Otherwise, the type of people who are able to do them is going to be the same kind of person every time. But yeah, so some tips before I go. If you make everything a learning experience, you will never have a bad time. You have to gut 30 rats in a day, you're going to learn a lot about rat intestines and a lot about how rats work. It will be cool. It will be gross, but it will be cool. Ask people questions. Everybody's kind of dying to tell you their life story. People love to yap. I got to hear a lot of cool life stories and made a lot of cool connections, so that was awesome. Connections are just as valuable as paychecks. Suzanne, she's got the number of every single other wildlife rehabilitation facility in the state of Maryland and connects with them all the time. So if I want to work at the Patuxent Wildlife Rehabilitation, I've got it in. That's handy dandy. And lastly, enjoy it. I feel like there was a lot of points this summer where I was like, oh God, I don't want to do this. And then I was like, I'm going to go hold birds. That's somebody's dream. Somebody like wishes they were doing this right now. So yeah, that was my internship.
Anybody else not know what imping was? What? I need to know more.
Oh yeah, I'll answer. I'll take that real quick. Basically, so you take the feather off, and then they have like this inside stuff inside the feather that I don't know the words for, and I'll botch the words for, and you clean that out, and then you take literally a little wooden toothpick, and you whittle one end and stick it into the first feather, and then you take the bird, and you take their feathers off, and if you cut the feathers in the right place, it doesn't hurt them, it's like your hair. Yeah. And then you basically take the other end of the toothpick, put a little glue on there, and you slide it in. And then what happens is when they grow their next feather, if you do it correctly, the new feather that they grow after this feather will push the old one out, and they'll lose it just like a normal feather. So it's a really cool process to watch.
I have the weirdest dreams tonight, and I'm so looking forward to it. All right, Jacob.
Hey, I'm Jacob Santucci. This summer I interned at the Catamount Farm, which is not the one with the cows, but it's the horticulture farm down off Shelburne Road in South Burlington. So one of the biggest reasons that I decided to intern here was that I've worked as a farmhand in the past, and I hope to pursue a career in organic agriculture, but if anyone's worked as a farmhand, you know how stressful that is. And the most important thing is knowing what you're supposed to do rather than the why, and that just kind of gets left behind in the tasks. So there's basically a great opportunity to work on a farm that's basically just completely focused on education as well as getting work done. And that was basically building knowledge in everything from vegetable production and farm and business management and farm planning. It's a great environment to work closely with a lot of experienced UVM educators, and You really become close with UVM students with similar interests. It's really just like a super educational environment, which is kind of rare on farms. So every day looks super different. You really didn't know what to expect, but we meet at the farm between 7 and 8:30 a.m., which would totally depend on the weather. So there were some of those like 95-degree days this summer, so we'd have to get out there super early to beat the heat, because not only would it be hard for us to be working in the heat, but a lot of the vegetables could get damaged if we harvested them too late in the day. And we would just kind of keep up with general tasks such as weeding and tilling and just kind of general groundskeeping stuff. We would bring in CSA deliveries into town for customers, which if you don't know, CSA basically is community supported agriculture, where at the start of the season people can order a box of vegetables, and each week we'll bring out that harvest to them and they can go and pick it up downtown or at the farm. It's a pretty cool way for farms to make money ahead of time, rather than just waiting for production to actually start. And there would be classes during the week on lots of different things, from pest management to farming business plans. And one of the coolest parts was the interns and I would spend a good portion of our time managing the Abenaki garden on the farm, where basically we were assisting a student who was doing their master's in traditional gardening, and they basically received a bunch of different seeds from the Ethan Allen Center, where there were different varieties of maize, squash, sunflowers, and beans that were traditionally cultivated by Abenaki people. And it was just really cool to learn the different techniques and how much different it is to the techniques on the rest of the farm. Super interesting. I learned a lot of things, but I guess the most important thing was just learning the general stuff that had previously felt above me, such as management, planning, kind of just crop rotation, stuff like that. Cover cropping was one of the biggest and most important things I learned. The farm I worked at did not really practice that, so it's super interesting to see how beneficial that could be in an organic setting. And one of the most rewarding parts was being able to go and work on the other farm I was working at this summer, and bringing this knowledge back and actually being able to implement a lot of the stuff that I was learning at the UVM farm. It's a pretty small farm, the other one, and it's been in the red for the past few seasons, so it was cool to kind of see things get a little bit more productive with a lot of the things I was bringing back. And I guess if I had to recommend one thing to future interns, it would be that a lot of the managers are going to come up and just offer things throughout the season, and just always say yes. They're going to come up and offer stuff like, you want to learn how to drive the new tractor, or there's going to be guest speakers coming in talking about business planning, stuff like that. You really get to choose what you do there, but it's most beneficial to just ensure you do a variety of stuff rather than falling into the routine of just weeding every day, tractoring every day. Yeah.
And Jacob.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I worked at Fitzgerald Environmental Associates this summer. You have heard that there's a lot of flooding. This was a picture from up the Northeast Kingdom around the Silvio Conti National Wildlife Management Area. We were supposed to do work at the other end of that road. We couldn't, which is kind of nice if you want to look at it that way. This is Potash Brook. I bet a lot of people have been there. The company does some stream monitoring there. We got to go fishing one day. It was kind of fun. So my main task at the company this summer was to be a part of this contract they had with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. The agency wanted to inventory all of their state-owned forest roads for erosion issues and AMP compliance. AMP is acceptable management practices, which is what the state wants people doing forest work to abide by to prevent erosion issues, which is a big problem here. So every one of those roads was split up into a 100-meter segment. We had to go walk that segment and then fill out a survey for everything that we were seeing and what we thought could be done to improve that segment. There were 11,000 segments we were supposed to do this summer. I don't know if we got to all of them. That's 1,100 kilometers, which is baffling to think about that just the state owns that amount of road. Really important work. I mean, I'll get to it. In this map, this is a Velco line, so a power line, and the purple means it's bad. So they weren't doing great, which is kind of the story in the state. And it's really important because when you go out of Burlington or you go out of Montpelier or any of the handful of cities we have in the state, it's mostly forest roads that people are using to get around. And when they flood, and it turns into a really big issue. So it felt good that we could kind of pave the way for improvements in the future. Some of the other things I did topographic surveying, so I got to sit behind the scope, and this is what you look at. You look at your friend holding a little laser with a little prism. Did soil infiltration tests. We did some stormwater modeling. This is in HydroCAD. That's like kind of what everyone does for stormwater modeling. We did some stream geomorphic assessments, which are really cool. I actually got to draw some project plans. This was a beaver dam analog restoration project that we were planning in the Wolcott Family Natural Area in Colchester. I was really proud of that. And then again, they monitor all these impaired streams. So I just thought it was kind of cool. I got to take a picture of the conductivity sensor in Potash Brook. I got scolded for that because he said don't put anything in Potash Brook that you hope to be anywhere near, because it's kind of gross. And then a lot of GIS work. Yeah, so I really learned about the Vermont AMPs. This was like one of my last days, and I just had to take a picture of it because it was so pretty and well done. This is the CCC road going up to the Lower Crop Trail on the Underhill side of Mansfield. This is what a good road looks like, and this is what a bad road looks like. And I saw a lot of these. So this is a 4-foot level. That's like a 3-foot gully in the road. There's another bad road, and another, and some more bad roads. There were lots. This is like 10 feet deep right there. I wish I got a better picture of it because it was kind of crazy. Takeaways, got a lot of AutoCAD experience. That's what the drawing project plans was in. HydroCAD, like I mentioned, making professional connections, building my reputation, and I kind of figured out this erosional forensics thing. Like you walk up to a place and you're like, what happened here? How did this come to be? So, and like this, that's kind of weird looking, and it's because there used to be a culvert there, and then it got pushed all the way 40 feet downstream, which is crazy. Got to see a lot of Vermont's forests, which I'm really happy about. This is like my last day up in Bolton. It was super pretty. Saw some gnarly roads, which get me kind of excited now, unfortunately. Got to do that site design, which again I was really happy about. Making an impact in the state, hopefully for the future. And we had an office pet. Her name's Josie. Super cute. Like the chillest 3-year-old dog I've ever met. As you can tell. Tips, use your LinkedIn. I don't have an Instagram, and I use LinkedIn like Instagram. I'm on it a lot. This was I made a connection with this guy. He used to be at UVM. He was in engineering. I've known him for a couple years, and he's kind of why I got this job when I applied to it. He saw me, and he's like, I know that guy, which was really cool. I was lucky enough that they actually asked me, first week, what else do you want to do? I know there's red flags and stuff. That's a big green flag. They're asking you what you want to do. Definitely seek out that kind of energy. And then form connections with all of your peers and animals. Those are the best. Thank you.
Next up, Ava.
Hi guys, I'm Ava. I'm a senior environmental science major, and this summer my site for my internship was the Echo Leahy Center for Lake Champlain. And before working at Echo, I bet a lot of us probably have walked by it down College Street by the waterfront, but maybe haven't heard their mission statement, which I think sums up what they do pretty well, which is inspiring and engaging families in the joy of scientific discovery, the wonder of nature, and the care of Lake Champlain. So they are Vermont's Science and Nature Museum, but not only are they just a museum, they also run a vibrant event business, a really successful toy store, and a super yummy creamy stand. And I got to work at all three of them. So my days looked really, really different depending on what they needed and where I was. But in general, it would start with a 9 a.m. meeting where we would go over tasks because ECHO has a lot of different departments and we all do different things. And my internship actually spanned across different departments. So I was working in events, but I was also working in guest services and like the retail side of it. So that was really exciting because my day-to-day was always changing. And something that I would definitely recommend if you take this internship is liking having that flexibility. Like if you like having something different every day, having different sites for your job, it definitely was something that I always looked forward to. And then, whether it was helping customers find something in the gift shop to commemorate their travels or sending a bride down the aisle with the sunset of Lake Champlain in the back, I had a really good time learning about ECHO's operations and how the Vermont tourism industry kind of affected that. A lot of what they needed from me and where I would be stationed depended on what the revenue streams looked like from the previous week. So we would have our system that we would check in everyone for the museum, and it would tell us who was coming in based on school groups, who was coming in for events, who was coming in as members, and so that provided a really concrete way to kind of like check our feedback and see where we could like best put our efforts. So one of my favorite events that we did at ECHO this summer was 7 Days event, which kind of highlights people's favorite people, places, and businesses in Vermont. ECHO got Best Indoor Play Space and Best Nature Center, and so it was really exciting to kind of talk to the other local businesses and stuff. If you've ever tried Off-Me Creamies, they're a really good non-dairy creamy place in Williston. And so seeing like almost 1,000 people come inside the museum for a bunch of different reasons is always really exciting because sometimes we have people coming for events, coming for a school program, or other things as well. So, big button, thank you. So ECHO does a lot for the community on top of just like membership and outreach. One of our events that I loved to talk about was the Turtle Head Start program, which is how ECHO kind of like raises soft-shell turtles and then they release them back into the environment, and it's like one of our intern programs. And we highlighted that during Wild Turtle Weekend this summer, which was really fun to watch. They also do a lot of DEI and inclusion for the community, like highlighting, during Black History Month, they highlighted like different Black-owned businesses in Vermont. And we also try to like connect the mission of science and learning for everybody. So they try to make it more inclusive and other people can experience it. So like people who have sensory or like auditory sensitivities, we have sensory maps and stuff so that they can have a better time going to the museum. And really just connecting people that science is for everybody and everybody should be able to access learning. And leaning on our local community, like community partners, would not be possible without it. So yeah.
Next up, we have our team of 4, but there's only 3 names on this side. James, Augie, Will, Cole? Yes. Yes.
And James.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Our coworker is currently stuck in the mud. We were at lab, the silviculture, and that's tough. The bus got a little bit stuck.
Okay.
So
That's
there's
fun.
3 of us right now.
All right.
Veg crew. I'm Augie.
I'm Will.
I'm Cole. So this summer we worked for the silviculture and applied forest ecology lab under Tony D'Amato, and it was us and then a couple other veg crew members, and we were setting up forest monitoring plots in the Umbagog Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah. We also worked in the Green Hills Preserve in New Hampshire, both these sites were in New Hampshire.
We gathered data throughout the Umbagog and Green Hills fixed plots, so they're going to be continuously monitored. We were establishing them in the Umbagog. You can see there's some of the Avenza layers, and we would have to navigate to those spots and then establish stuff with marking and gather data in them. Yes. So day to day, we would usually wake up around 6 and then get out to the field by 7. We were not at home for most of the summer, which was fun, but also challenging. We were in pretty rural sites. And then we would make our way into, deep woods and set up these plots with Avenza and other GPS tools. We recorded the overstory data first usually, although we got into a flow of it where we could switch things around. That included diameter, species, azimuth and stuff. You take forestry 110 is it movement? 111. It's basically that, but you're getting paid. So it was pretty fun. And then we also did the understory.
Yeah, and then for understory, we needed to learn a lot of species for that since we didn't really have any experience learning that at Rubenstein. But we decided to use C for iNaturalist so we could have pretty regular answers. We often discussed what we thought species would be and pointed them out to our supervisors to try to understand what was happening on the ecosystem. Yeah, that's our data. So why it was important. This job definitely helped us reinforce our forestry skills. It was really helpful working for the lab. We learned a lot about how data collection works, how it functions with the lab, and how the lab uses that data to help landowners like the wildlife refuge.
Yeah, so the data we were collecting wasn't going to one specific project. It's going to a bunch of different projects in the silviculture applied forest ecology lab. So there's so many facets to the management they were going to do in these forests, and a lot of it was related to climate change and the resiliency of these forests against climate change.
Saw a lot of moose there. That was pretty cool. You don't see that in Vermont too much, maybe in my experience. But being in the northeast of the Northeast was really cool. It's a whole different forest. So expanding our knowledge beyond what we learned in classes that are centered in Vermont was really cool. Even though it was mostly spruce fir, but it's cool.
Yeah, and we had a great work team. We worked very well together. We had a lot of different ideas and conversations and backgrounds all together.
Yeah, definitely learned a lot of independence and organizational skills as a group. We had a lot of independence in this job.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I will name pull from your slide, but also
Oh,
if you want to keep,
okay.
Keep going.
There's a few more with those years.
Okay, yeah, these are the bunnies we found at one of our plots. We had to wait to do this plot. I don't think we actually even established this one. We're very respectful of the wildlife. We really are, since it was wildlife refuge. Yeah, I don't think we really need to go through my slides too. It's pretty much the same. But any advice for future teams?
It's a lot of walking. You won't like it at the time, but now I really miss it. Yeah, it's forestry in general is really active. So if you do any internship in there, you're definitely going to be tired at the end of the day, which I think is a huge bonus.
Yeah, things change a lot in the research world, is what I learned. Our whole plan for the summer changed a week before we did the internship. So just be prepared for anything.
That was going to be my advice to be prepared.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to get ready.
So you guys were out in the woods and stuff. Where were you living?
We were living in a cabin on the second college grant from Dartmouth. It was kind of random that we were there. They just kind of put us in there. It was a common space for people. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Maya Pepchak. I'm a junior and I'm studying environmental science. So I'm going to tell you about my internship at Glen Ford this summer. So Glen Ford Conservation Corporation, that's the full name. They're a nonprofit located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, super close to where I live. They're on the border of Philadelphia County and Bucks County, and also they're on the confluence of the Delaware River and Crescent Creek, and they're part of the Delaware River watershed. Originally, this land was owned by the Lenape Native Americans, and they had the original ownership of the land. Since then, colonization occurred, and then it was owned privately, and then it transitioned into the public sector, and now they're owned by Fairmount Park, just like conservation. So, they have environmental intern projects, and then they also have environmental art intern projects. I was more on the environmental side, super small team. Like I said, it's a nonprofit. There was only 4 of us environmental interns, so I had a lot of jobs. So this is the first thing that I did was public programming. With my intern, Ava, we designed 3 programs, and we really wanted to do arts and crafts. So we did 2 eco-design crafts, which these were all taken from my internship. It was a really great opportunity. So the first one was about natural dyes and flower pounding, and then the second one was sun printing. These were all free opportunities for the public, so it's just like a really great learning experience. We taught them about how to identify native species, just like really great to get the community together. And then our last program was for composting. I learned a lot about composting this summer. We have like a 3-bin system on our property, so we learned about that. We taught the public just how it works, decomposition, and everything like that. And then I was also a kayak guide, which was really fun. We held public excursions for like big events, and then we also had like private little boating events. And this was like super great for teaching. I taught everyone about safety and how to like kayak like in general, like from the ground up, which is really cool. And also like the history of Glen Ford and just like the ecology around the area. So then the main part of my internship, they have a program called Riverways Ambassadors, and what this is a 6-week program in the summer. It's for 11th and 12th graders, and it's essentially just like a watershed ecology education summer camp. So there was a lot that went on in this program, and it was still new and developing. So I was really glad to be a part of like the curriculum development. They were super flexible with like the ideas that I had and building off of the ideas that they had in years past. So it's really cool like seeing like the behind the scenes of like how to build a program like this. Some of the educational pieces that we did, I taught a birding lesson. We taught composting. We did weekly water testing, which is here. We learned a lot about macroinvertebrates in the mud a lot this summer. Watershed science, as I mentioned, native species identification. We used iNaturalist. We taught them how to use iNaturalist, but then we also went through keys, and that was really cool. And just like city and urban natural space management. Something that also was my job and my coworkers' jobs are sparking excitement and curiosity with environmental topics. A lot of these students hadn't seen like any of these concepts before because it's just not taught in schools as much. So we really tried to bring the enthusiasm to this program. Oh, and then also I was able to certify everyone under the American Canoe Association to become level 2 kayakers. So that was very cool. I was also in charge of doing some social media work. I just post weekly wrap-ups, and I gave a little description of what we did, just to keep the public updated. Some key learnings from my experience is that you don't have to be an expert on the topic to teach about it. This was my first teaching experience, so I feel like learning that like really made me more comfortable in like a teaching setting. And then also thought-provoking conversations and explorations are very important to remaining a lifelong learner. My coworkers were like super inspiring to me, like just like that they were even still learning to this day. Like it's very like all-encompassing, and even just like listening to podcasts and being educated in different ways is super important. Also, they were really supportive of my ideas, creating them into realities. Like super supportive, so I was really grateful for that. And then also exposure in education and the environment is super essential for all humans, which leads me to the impact and importance of Glen Ford as a nonprofit. This program for Riverways Ambassadors was focused towards city students, and they don't get a lot of exposure to natural areas, just from talking to them before they heard from them. So teaching them where our water comes from is super valuable lesson for them to learn. And also, again, provoking curiosity about the natural world. Many of these students hadn't gone up and sniffed the bark of a tree or stepped in the mud every day. So this is really new for them. So just making them curious about different outdoor topics. Cool. There's the Lovelace Watershed sections. Oh yeah, and then DEI. So this program, so historically environmental spaces are predominantly white spaces. So just giving access to outdoor spaces is super important, especially for Black and people of color. So just making them feel like they belong is super important. And education on environmental racism and injustices is very empowering for them, just so they can maybe engage in environmental advocacy. And then the mission of Glenford as a whole is to bring together the Philadelphia community to enjoy and learn about environmental and cultural ecosystems. So these are my campers. We had 12 of them. They were amazing. I love them so much. Oh yeah, tips for interns. This is more in general, but I got this internship because I cold called someone. I searched up kayaking jobs. And then I found out they had environmental education programs. I was like, wow, this is actually amazing. And they hired me without even posting the job opportunity. So cold call, that's definitely good. Search early. Get out of your comfort zone. You don't have to be fully qualified to do something, because you'll learn along the way what you can do to fulfill the goal. Ask questions, and yeah. And then this is on the last night. We had a camp out on property. Very fun culmination of everything. It really they were enthusiastic about that. So if anything, learning that they did really appreciate this opportunity, it meant a lot. So.
And that concludes tonight's slam. So thank you. Round of applause to all the participants. Sitting around and hearing each other's stories. Keep telling those stories, right? And send your friends on Wednesday. The final slam will be happening back in this space, 5:15, and